Hey everyone, welcome back to the Crypto Mavericks. Super excited to have on today the co-founder of Camp, Nirav Murthy. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Hey, Joe, thanks for having me. Great to be here, man. Very excited.
Awesome. I think you're on the other side of the USA now, but I'm in Oakland and my wife works in Berkeley. I've seen you went to UC Berkeley, so
Yes.
come back sometime.
Yeah, I'm from the Bay Area. I'm a Fremont kid myself, of course. So, it's almost stereotypical that I end up at Berkeley, but, love my Cal, go Bears, proud alumni donor overall. Brother still lives in Oakland as well. So very familiar with the area. But yeah, since made the move to Brooklyn, which many people call, the Bay Area of the East at this point, to be honest with you.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I lived in New Jersey for 13 years. So I love New York. I went into New York working for a while, and Brooklyn wasn't what it is now. I mean, Brooklyn is a lot different. So definitely see the correlations there. Excited to hear about your journey. From the West Coast all the way to how you started camp.
Yeah, man, definitely. From the West Coast originally, as I alluded to earlier, went to school at Berkeley, studied finance and ended up doing, as every standard Bay Area kid does, either, tech or finance, and ended up doing investing in investment banking out of undergrad, specifically for entertainment, sports, gaming, and media and music at a firm called the Rain Group, and got a pretty exciting opportunity to see how digital media models were evolving in the 21st century. This was at the time when, things like Vice, BuzzFeed, Vox were, valued at $3 billion plus. And it was really that, media bubble that a lot of people alluded to, coinciding with the streaming wars and whatnot. And so I had a pretty robust experience there. And towards the end of my Rain career, in 2021, 2022, got the chance to sort of work with a lot of our gaming companies in our ecosystem as well as, or sorry, in our like sort of portfolio or clientele, as well as, entertainment studios. And during that 2021, 2022 magical areas, I'm sure you can remember, a lot of these folks are trying to get into NFTs in different ways, in various ways. And that got me really interested in sort of why are there not more people trying to help these Web2 companies actually get into Web3 in a pretty thoughtful and logical way? By virtue of being from the West Coast, I'd been like a retail holder of, basic crypto like Ethereum, Rippling for a time overall. But, it was nothing ever super meaningful until, we ended up starting camp in 2023. And at the time, we were really almost similar to like a Patreon of creator engagement platform overall in the blockchain. Eventually, what we realized is that we needed to own our own block space, which is what led us to building an L2. And then over time, as we started to make a big bet on IP in particular, we realized that the out of the box solutions that the L2s offered were just not robust enough for what we really wanted to do in terms of handling distribution, building our own provenance protocols into the chain directly. And that ultimately led us to building the L1, which has become Camp Network today, focused on transforming IP ownership for the agent economy.
Yeah, you went over a lot there, which is
Yeah,
great stuff.
happy.
People can re-listen to it.
I thought I'd throw the bottle at you, and then we can dissect each ingredient
Yeah.
there
No, this is
overall.
great. Usually I listen to podcasts on 2x myself personally, but I could just listen to this 1x whenever you re-listen to it. This
Yeah,
is
and
great.
hopefully, try and get those listening engagement CPMs up as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in the Bay here, AI is auto rage, but then IP has recently, I think that one of the first lawsuits was won, and you guys are really tackling that head on. So tell us how that intersects because crypto and AI supposedly fits very, very nicely. Both camp building your layer one, like you mentioned, and really helping with IP. How does that work out?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And you like alluded to something pretty strongly there where it's like in the Bay Area, AI is auto rage. I mean, candidly, over the last 12 to 15 months, AI and crypto has also been pretty auto rage. You hear everybody say like, oh, we're an AI blockchain, we're AI this. Like, what the fuck actually makes it AI overall, right? I think that's something that people really struggle with as a concept. And so I think the thing to dissect down is like originally on in AI and crypto, people were like, oh, we're an inference chain, or we're a trading chain, or we're distributed compute overall. And the problem is in crypto, we have very like follower herd mentality where the minute one person does something and raises a big number on it, everybody goes out and does that same thing. And so like you mentioned it on the head where it's AI and crypto has a lot of very obvious synergies overall. And our thesis on this, which you also mentioned on the lawsuit side of things, is provenance is going to matter more than ever before. In the age of where we believe 95% of all IP in the future will be generated via AI, the actual mechanisms by which those models are trained and which the agents are actually trained are going to be way more important than ever before. And so one of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about is how do you actually enable that? And we view blockchain as the best mechanism to do that. Real-time timestamped, distributed so nobody can actually sort of cancel any of those transactions. And obviously real markers on proving when a transaction was actually approved or flawed overall. And so that's why we really believe on an IP is sort of the most applicable sort of layer of AI overall. One of the other things that we sort of think about is you mentioned the lawsuits point. Reddit GPT was just the first of many. We expect to see a decade-long sort of army of lawsuits waiting to happen. Getty Images Stability AI is another one. Hollywood is another one that's sort of being sued by Midjourney, or sorry, Hollywood is sued Midjourney overall. And with each of these things, we're still trying to figure out what the legal clarity is around IP copyright and models. And sure, when it's like creators and entertainment, the stakes are dollars, right? But as we start thinking about this in healthcare, when doctors actually put a tweet about this, but when doctors are using models to basically dissect, hey, quickly, what should I be thinking about overall? That becomes a much bigger issue and lives are at stake. And so ultimately, we view Camp as the greatest user owned and verifiable IP layer. And why that really matters is because long term, that doubles as the greatest decentralized data sampling marketplace in the world for all future models overall.
So how does that how do I compare that to the regulated world? You guys weren't not going to be like a repository of all information like the internet is, right? I mean, is that the goal?
I mean, the goal is to be the repository of all user uploaded information. That's definitely correct. I mean, our thesis on this is if you saw like Web 1, right? It was like scripts, like people would write things on paper. Web 2 was a lot of like, let's publish this on the web overall. Our thesis is that the next generation of all IP will be minted on blockchain in the first place, because that way there's no question or no like argumentation on whose it actually is in the first place. And so we expect to see a lot of IP, like native IP built on Web3 in the first place. And we believe that Camp will be the home for all of those things. Now, that obviously requires a little bit of work from the application layer as well, which is something that we help incubate. But it's like, I'll give you some simple examples, right? Text. Right. Like the internet was a gold mine of text because everybody would write on these various news publications or like even Facebook or Twitter or whatever it really was. We're seeing text-based apps come out on Camp overall, whether that's social media or things similar to like the Wattpads of the world, which you could think about as like blogging overall. Second is image, right? Image repositories are huge. Getty, all these guys, those are the ones in the big lawsuits overall. But we're starting to see some of those come up on Camp as well. And then obviously with some of the labeling platforms, you can sort of tag what type of images are what. Then you think about music, right? Like what Spotify did for Web 2, obviously the gross part about Spotify, and I'm a huge fan of the company, don't get me wrong, is the streamers don't like the actual artists don't get paid that much. You're getting paid 0.002 cents per stream if you're a top 250 song overall. And obviously that's a dynamic scale based on your popularity. We have teams like Jukebox, right? We have teams like Hitmaker. And the whole idea there is effectively you're able to actually keep the bulk of the economics. The bigger thing we've seen after working with all these creators is that they're more focused than ever before on maintaining control of their IP versus that extra sponsorship dollar. If I can own a dollar of equity capital or equity dollars in this business versus an extra dollar of sponsorship dollars, I'm always going to take the equity dollars over the end of the day. And that's what creators are starting to realize now more so than ever before.
In terms of the traditional IP licensing, which is slow and opaque, like you mentioned, how do you guys, truncate that for people through Camp?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And like, there's a lot of things to dissect here. The traditional IP licensing model is like 6 to 9 months, one deal per something every like a different licensing deal for every aspect of the business, 500,000 to $2 million in legal fees at minimum. That sucks. Like unless you're Disney or one of the major studios or one of the major like labels, you really can't afford it. And that's unfortunately why a lot of these like creators get taken advantage of overall. The smart contract evolution changes that completely on a whim. If I'm a prosumer and I like making tunes in my like bedroom or I produce in my bedroom or whatnot and I upload it, as opposed to having to figure out like, oh my God, this is how much this person's gonna have to pay me via a legal contract. In the smart contract itself, I can basically make it such that, okay, if you want to use that, you owe me 10 cents. Or I can make it such that if you remix this and you upload it anywhere else and you make money, you owe me a cent for every stream. Smart contracts just basically streamline that entire process of what legal paperwork has done historically. And the reason for that is because it's an if-then clause effectively. And that's what modifies this entire industry completely. We're not looking at like a quick pump and dump over here. This is changing the entire way that entertainment is financed and licensed in the first place overall.
I love it. I love it. Base is trying to do social coins, which I don't think is the right, leading point. I mean, Camp looks like you're doing something more foundational, but how do we bridge that gap, right? Like, how do you integrate or not integrate or with the creators of today, right?
It's a really good question. Yeah. It's a really good question. I mean, look, and I'll say a couple of things here. The base sort of social coins thing is like an interesting experiment, right? And you can trace it back to like probably 2 years ago with Friendtech, when it was basically like a few of these, what I call like T2, T1.5 celebrities who were like how do I monetize my name, image, and likeness, sorry, further. And the answer is like, let's launch a token and see what really comes out of it. The problem with a lot of the creators and what they see is like, okay, cool, I'm getting paid 25K up front. I'm getting some 25K of trading fees, but like they see their chart literally go like
Hmm.
down. And then they're like, wait, damn, why does everybody hate me? This is really bad for my brand equity and whatnot. And so I think the bigger thing overall is seeing sustainable mechanisms of what actually works. Like, and this is like a thesis I have on tokens overall, where it's like, gone are the days where you can just like pump tokens for no reason overall. It's like at this point in the cycle, and especially where we are in crypto as an industry, over the next 3 to 5 years, you'll need to see some like actual fundamentals and a reason for people to actually buy the token beyond just like, hey, trust us, bro. Like there'll be some sort of price go up action overall in the future. And so we're actually already starting to see some examples of this. Like just to name a few on Camp itself, we have a team called Chorus, which is sort of like an AI remixing platform. They've got artists on board such as like Dead Mouse and a bunch of the Beatport artists. And the idea is they upload their stems, which a stem, for those of you who don't know, is basically the individual component of a song. That can be like the drum beat, the guitar line, the synth line, and whatnot. And you can use all those stems to remix and create new songs overall. That's an easy example of how Web2 folks are onboarding their IP, which is all done through our Origin protocol onto Camp directly. Another example of this is we work really closely with the Black Mirror team. I'm not sure if you're familiar with sort of that show on Netflix overall, but they've launched a token. It's trading at like 10 to 20 million bucks right now. But the idea is if you own that Black Mirror token, you get super unique perks that other people will never get access to. Things like that include early access to the show, the ability to sort of play across the ecosystem of games that they have. If you're one of the top holders, you actually help design covers of the actual Black Mirror magazine as well. And then longer term, where we see this is we work with a ton of these different T1 IPs, a few of them on Netflix. I can't say anything obviously right now, but the idea is if you hold the tokens, you get a percentage of the royalties, which really changes the entire entertainment industry and sort of in terms of the way that it's financed, right? Historically, you usually have to take a pretty big credit line or credit facility overall. And then unfortunately, these are like 25%, 30% terms. And candidly, not a lot of people get them because there are a lot of first-time filmmakers. And obviously there's no guarantee on sort of these like revenues for these associated projects and whatnot. Whereas in crypto, you can sort of say, hey, we're gonna launch a token, or we can even do this via like a lending pool and promise 25% APY on it, but only lock up your capital for 6 months. So it's sort of 12.5%, or even lower, right? Like it could be 15 to 20%. You set the terms and conditions on the pool. And then what you're really doing is you believe in your project, you own the entire creative control yourself. You go sell the rights to one of these big streamers like Netflix, Amazon, Disney, whatever, and you use the revenues to pay back the yield instantly. And it's such a better business model overall. And the quickness in doing it is so much quicker and so much cheaper than going through the entire lending facility proper paperwork as well.
Yeah, is quickness become a setback in the future? I just think I created a term. Is over IPization a word? Like if AI agents go out there and I don't know, I'll give an example. I was thinking of Pat Riley. He
Yeah,
trademarked the term for Pete, right? And which is
of
very
course.
general.
Yeah, yeah.
Like if we have a million bots, a million agents out there, you know, doing a lot of quick IP, just content out there just for the sake of IPing it, right? How does that hurt, or is that even a concern? That's just something I just made in my mind.
It's a good question. I actually would push back and say that's probably a good thing to happen overall. Let me explain why. People are like limited to this definition of IP of like it's entertainment. That's such like inaccurate. It's so inaccurate. It's not even funny over here. Your agents are going to become your IP to some degree. Like if you're a developer behind an agent, that's yours, right? Like if somebody else is using that, you should get paid for it. Let me give you a really simple example. I'm a huge restaurants guy. Every restaurant, every city that I go to, I have like 16, 17 different reservations that I want to go to. Now, why don't I share the love of how good my palate really is? And so I developed basically like a near of resi or like near of restaurant reservation like agent. And I basically say, hey, anybody can use this. You give me a kickback of 1 to 3 cents overall. That makes total sense. I should register that as IP that people can actually flow back to me. And if other people are using it, I should be comped for actually doing all the work on creating that in the first place, right? So the term IP is so limited in scope of what people think it is without realizing that there's a much broader picture of it. Now, the reason why I brought that up is because I think the over IP registration is a good thing. At some point, we'll see people basically want to say, like, oh, wow, I bet on this like KOL before he was a KOL. Why don't I get any points in him overall? And that could be via like a KOL token. That could even be via a certain tweet. And at some point, I really think what we'll see is the ability to basically socially trade or socially bet on, for lack of better terms, or like socially speculate on pretty much everything. And all that will be done via the blockchain because that's the only way in which you can process those microtransactions.
Makes sense. I think my scope was too limited into the Web 2 or traditional world. Where in
Which
the
is
world of Web
super, which is super fair to clarify. Like that's the way that most people view IP to date. But as we like, one of the things I mentioned at the top is 95% of the world's future IP will be generated via AI, and that's why the over registration I think is going to be better overall.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Yeah, very
Yeah,
interesting. I would love that restaurant list. Yeah, for sure.
we'll do a nice dinner after all this is done. Don't worry, in Oakland.
Oh, I don't know about Oakland. Yeah, but definitely in the Bay, there's some good eats.
Of
Um,
course.
so what's next for you guys? I know you guys got some big names on board that you can mention what's going to happen. We'll talk about that offline. You could tell me offline. But yeah, you guys are building products, shipping IP, major partnerships. What's next?
Yeah, I mean, look, we get pretty excited about the actual partnerships. Happy to talk about a few of those overall as well. And I think the bigger thing is like IP as an asset class is still pretty misunderstood, to be totally honest with you. I would actually guess that it's pretty similar to where like RWA was about 2 years ago. And then earlier this year and even late last year, you saw this like ginormous watershed moment where everybody's like, holy shit, Ondo just clicks in my head, right? It's like I put in $1, I get 4% yield because I'm basically getting US treasuries. And we envision like IP to have a pretty similar thing overall over the next few months or so. Some of the big partnerships that we're pretty excited about is like Roblox is coming to camp in the next couple of weeks overall.
Mhm.
That's obviously one of the world's greatest gaming platforms. One of the big ones that we're excited about is the idea of tokenizing festivals. One of the big bets, if you talk to a lot of the media companies, is because AI is becoming such a like hot topic and everything is expected to be virtual, we expect a lot more dollars to flow into live as a general concept. If you're doing 4-day work weeks, that means, which is sort of the way that the world is trending, to be totally honest with you, we should expect that more people are going to have more free time on their hands. What do you do when you have free time? You leave the house. And so that's where like our big contrarian bet is on live over like the metaverse overall. And so one of the things we get really excited by is on tokenizing actually a lot of these big music festivals. The idea there is pretty similar where you basically get a percentage of the festival and earn some of the revenues associated with that, with all of the actual tickets being NFTs that we can track directly. And then if you're the festival, you're getting so much more insight into who your actual customers are and where they're spending their dollars, as opposed to like Ticketmaster being one of the venues by which they buy the tickets. Then you have to go figure out with Visa how they actually handle the payments. What are the most popular places? You have to go integrate with the POS on the beverage and food side of things. You can handle that all through the app and basically have the composability that blockchain was always promised. So we get really excited about the new IPs that we're adding is sort of the first question. The second thing is we're starting to work a lot more with some of the big Web2 modeling companies on sort of saying like, hey, what is the type of data that you need? As I mentioned earlier, like this IP copyright and model training war is becoming more and more front of mind for all the AI companies. So they're sort of thinking about, okay, shit, like how do I actually train this in a compliant way right now, such that in 5 years I don't get slapped with a $50 million lawsuit? So starting to work with them and sort of say, hey, what are the types of data you guys find really interesting? And then, using some community incentives and tokens on top of that to sort of attract that level of data so that we can make sure that everybody is sort of feasting together on that piece. And then I think that the third is, I genuinely believe on camp we have some of the most interesting applications that I've ever seen before. Most of the time on some of these really big chains, it's like you have a pretty interesting speculation launchpad, you have a perps dex, and then you have sort of like a normal dex. And that's like 90% of what people use. And like anytime you see a consumer app that people actually want to use, people flock to it and speak of it like it's the greatest thing of mankind. Prime example of this is like Blackbird. And I think on camp, what we're building is an ecosystem of consumer apps in what I call like the Web 2.5 space that people really want to use. They would function without tokens, but blockchain represents a really unique angle to them adding on to the business, whether it's via wallets or microtransactions overall. And so I think it's going to be a really fun 60, 90, 120 days for us overall.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned Blackbird. I use them every single week
Yep.
at Chase Center. Yeah, I'm a season tickets to the Golden State Valkyries, and the only restaurant I can use is at Chase Center for Blackbird. But yeah, to your point, mobile applications where access is easy, onboarding is easy for people, and actual use case where you're actually eating, right? It makes sense. So definitely look forward to utilizing a lot of partnerships that's coming on board and camp and seeing what you guys are doing. I
Yeah.
think you guys are gonna do some big things, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I think something that you hit on the head, which is like eating, which is like something I do. That's actually a pretty poignant point. It's not to be redundant over there, but the reason why is because historically a lot of blockchain stuff is like the PMF that we found in blockchain is obviously like the speculation of digital assets. Call it gambling, call it trading, it's all bucketed into the same thing. The problem is most of blockchain behavior and applications today don't really do a good job of meeting fans where they already are or like shaping into existing behavior. Whereas Blackbird does exactly that. It's like I go to a restaurant, I'm like, oh shit, I can get loyalty over here. Like, fuck yeah, let me like tap my phone over here and basically do it, right? Now, if there are more apps that actually did that, think about how much more adoption we would have as an industry. And like obviously you saw early signs of this with like gaming with some degree of it with like PDE. But most people don't realize this, but games are pretty hard to build. To build like a AAA game, you're looking at 5 to 15 years minimum and about 50 to $100 million. And obviously that scales down as you get towards the more hyper casual games. But the problem is like tokens become a really good mechanism of user acquisition, but not a great mechanism of retention, obviously, because most tokens only trend down over time. But I think we'll start to see a lot more of applications in the future try and become better versions of what they were in Web 2 with actually interesting token models as opposed to like the Ponzi-nomics of like, let's make this work until it doesn't and we run out of tokens overall. And I think that's one of the things that we're really enabling on camp with this, which is like, things like shopping, like things like watching TV, earning for all those types of things become a lot more interesting, or like even painting or writing, all those things become a lot more interesting in terms of attracting the non-native crypto users that we have as like the Circle Jerk of blockchain today.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your mission there. Well, not mission, but what you mentioned about live events and just meeting the clients where they already are. And we're finally starting to see after, I don't know, was it 16 years now since Bitcoin started? Like the big banks came on, right? That it took 16 years for SoFi and JP Morgan Chase to finally deploy. And it's exactly what you said. The speculation led it. I think retail is like 5, 10 years away, but hopefully Camp will help shorten that gap for us.
No, man, that's the dream. And like, look, look, I think it's really easy to be jaded in the crypto industry, especially as like founders. And I'm sure a lot of founders you talk to feel pretty similar because it's like, what the fuck is the point of all this? Tokens only trend down over time. But it's not totally dissimilar to like the internet bubble, where a lot of people raised really early and made a lot of money really early. And then at some point, it's like, wow, shit, we actually have to build something pretty meaningful. And after that comes Amazon. After that comes like Facebook and like real apps that people want to use. And so we're still in such the early innings of all this. Like you mentioned 16 years. We're like, that was like a white paper, right? Like nobody really did anything in crypto outside of like just full port ICOs in like the late 2000 teens until I would call it the early 2020s. And I think like huge kudos to Dapper Labs and the Flow blockchain guys for showing us like, oh shit, like NFTs are actually interesting at scale and like store value is approved, like it has PMF, at least in the NFT line of things. And so I think like now you're starting to see a lot of folks who are much more Web3 native come out of college. And like those are going to be the founders who shape the next decade of real consumer app development. And I think, look, in about 5 to 7 years, I think you'll start to see people start using apps without even realizing that blockchain is under the hood out of all of them. And that coincides really nicely with like developer tools getting really nice. Like Privy has done a phenomenal job of abstracting away any of the wallet concerns overall. And so these things take a lot of time, but once that happens, it's not like a scale linear model. It's like almost an exponential model where it takes a really long time for something to happen, and then boom, you kind of shoot up pretty quickly.
You mentioned it, man. That's what got me back into crypto. I traded crypto 2017. I was one of those not financially focused. Dapper Labs, NBA Top Shot, tugged at my
Yeah,
heartstring, got me back in. I still meet with the Top Shot people every single year in Las Vegas. Is the best time of my life. I get them on the
yeah.
pod 2 times a year. It's amazing. I'm waiting for that time to come back. Can we please go back to those days where it's not just speculation on meme coins, but actual utility? I'm a near Napa. I got like 3 Napa Valley wine NFTs, believe it or not, that I go every year to drink. So I'm waiting for those times. I'm waiting
So
for it.
Joe, I'll actually ask you a question. I don't know how often this happens, but I'll become the host and you become the guest. But on your like Napa Valley NFTs that you use, how do you sort of verify? Like, how do the vineyards sort of say like, oh, this is legit, or it's kind of just like, if he has it, he probably has it type situation.
Yeah, it's kind of like the latter, what you mentioned. It's still early days. It's like an ad hoc, right? They work with an outside provider. They don't have like blockchain native skills. So it's still very, early days. And a lot of them pivoted. They pivoted from Web3 back to Web 2, but they still have some pieces of Web 3 remaining there. And I still get to enjoy it. But we're seeing better ones come out. Like you mentioned, Blackbird, like that's a mainstay here. We're seeing I have a founder that comes on every year, Chubby Cattle. You love food. I'm not sure if you heard about Chubby Cattle.
Of
I
course, of
got
course, of course. Yeah,
David. I
yeah, yeah.
got David on here every year, and they're crushing. I use that NFT like 6, 7 times. They made more money off of me and that NFT mint than that NFT works. Let me tell you that. They got me
Yeah,
spending
it
money
does. Yeah,
there. I
yeah,
never spend money at restaurants at that level, and I'm like, why am I eating premium Wagyu beef
yeah.
6 times a year? It works. So I like the benefits of it, and so yeah, so we're seeing some better uses for the early stages of NFT, some evolutions of it. So I'm excited for those.
And look, I think like again, the thing about blockchain, and I would say this is like a camp thing in particular. Like, look, we're not another like DeFi L1 that's like for TVL. Like, if you're building a DeFi TVL L1, like good. Like honestly, realistically, your price will probably pump harder than ours in the initial days. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, we opened pretty high, and then we went really high, and then we went down. Like most of like the new primitives trend to be, whereas people tend to follow like, oh, what do I know? Like I can count this to this, this, and this. But truly, we're building for like a 3 to 5 year timeline, and like by 3 to 5, I mean 3 to 100 35-year timeline overall. Like this is generally going to change the way that, you know, all entertainment is financed, as I mentioned earlier with some of those examples, the way that people actually attend live events, the way that people publish their content, and the way that people prove that something is or else. And that's, you know, a multi-hundred billion dollar industry, as opposed to looking at something in sort of like the near term future. And so, as you mentioned, like you're starting to see very, very early use cases of this having real applications in the world. But I think you'll start to see a shit ton more over the next 5 to 10 years.
Amazing. Yeah, I have one last question for you, and I'll share
Of
first.
course.
Like, I love having my idealistic views of Web3. One thing I would love to see is just DeFi attack credit card points. I would like to DeFi yield my points over at Chase and Amex and some airlines and swap them dynamically for another token and spend them. Believe there's a huge market for that. Hopefully, you guys can tackle that, or know someone there. What's your idealistic view or use case for crypto overall? That's something that you would like to see. Another
Uh,
one is just like walking onto an airplane. After pass TSA, I don't want to pull out my boarding pass. Just scan my body. Just let me on the
Correct.
plane.
Yeah. Yeah. Couple before I sort of answer, really interesting. One of the first ideas we had when starting camp was going to like some of these conglomerates and basically starting like a joint loyalty program with the token being the unit of exchange across all of it. And so the idea is like, why the fuck do I have like 5 million United miles, but I can't get like 20% off McDonald's and
Right.
whatnot? Because one of those things you do more than the other, depending on who you are. It could be the miles over the McDonald's, but obviously like these loyalty programs are super siloed and there should be a way to link them. So it's definitely something we've thought about in the future. I think a couple of things that I get pretty excited by. Number one is like digital wallets, as you mentioned, is a pretty good one. Like nobody should be needing to carry a wallet. Like everybody in the world outside of America feels like basically uses tap to pay or mobile
Yeah.
payments as the norm. So that's like a pretty good one to me. I think one of the benefits of blockchain historically is like this idea of composability. And so having native composability in the apps itself, like TikTok is in a really good job of this, where like if I'm doing TikTok shop, I don't even have to leave the app in order to put in like my Venmo or my Google Pay when I'm buying something. But I'd like to see that across more of it, using stable coins as sort of the mechanism to pay because instantaneous settlement, international. I think the third is a lot more gas abstraction. Like I think one of the, and like this also deals into like fiat on ramp, where I think one of the biggest fears people have with using blockchain in the first place is like, oh my God, like pulling out a credit card, the first time it doesn't work, the second time it doesn't work because there's like a 25% chargeback rate. And then even when I do it, why am I paying like $14 for $12 worth of crypto overall? I think those types of things really scare people. And then I think lastly is actually building this repository for all data sampling. Like what we're doing actually to me is a really interesting mission. Like imagine if I'm building a model for something like restaurants or reservations, right? And I can go to like a sexy Airbnb style interface and say like, hey, I need food data text, and I can basically filter by all those types of things and basically just one click license that. That to me is the real value unlock and how this becomes like a $1 trillion business overall.
Amazing. Amazing. It's been great having you on. Where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter, Nirav Murthy. On also on Twitter, Cam Network XYZ. My Telegram is NMURTH. If you want to hit me up, I try and respond as much as possible, but bear with me if I'm a couple days late or so. Other than that, you hit me up anywhere you want. I'm always around conferences and whatnot, but really, really excited about this and really appreciate the time, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Nerv. Love to have you back on.
Great. Thank you so much.